De Keyser's 1997 study is one of the most cited skill-building studies. It used an artificial grammar called autopractin. There is a sizable amount of research done with artificial languages, and these lack characteristics of natural languages. For example, key elements of syntax are left out, and the letter strings lack grammatical properties and meaning. De Keyser himself made these points in 1994, writing, "It is not clear to what extent the research on artificial grammars can predict anything about natural language learning. Most importantly, the letter strings do not have any referential meaning, which again is not representative of natural language learning." While autopractin used in his study had words with meaning, other characteristics of a natural language were simplified and missing. There were just 16 nouns and 16 verbs in 2 to 3 word sentences with only 4 rules for word endings that had no irregularities. Every form had only one meaning, and everything could be represented visually. 61 subjects participated in 22 computer-based sessions over an 11-week period. To motivate them, they were paid more per hour for better performance. In the first 2 sessions, subjects were presented with 10 pages that explained the 4 grammar rules, along with 16 vocabulary pictures. Learning was then checked with sentence and picture combinations. Then there were 19 sessions spent on comprehension and production practice, with explicit feedback and testing without feedback. The 22nd session was for final testing. To test production, subjects were provided the verbs and nouns and just had to fill in the grammatical word endings. The results provided evidence of the 3 stages of skill development and largely matched the power function characteristic of skill acquisition theory, and that reaction times and error rates steeply declined in the first 2 sessions and then gradually declined over the remaining sessions. Another characteristic, skill specificity, was partially supported, subjects performing better when they had practiced the rule in that specific skill being tested, comprehension or production, but the subject that had less skill-specific practice of all 4 rules outperformed everyone. De Keyser responsibly mentions 3 critiques of his own study. Skill theory may not be equally effective for everyone and with all rules. He does not claim that automatizing explicit knowledge is the same as implicitly acquired knowledge, and he would not make recommendations for classrooms based on this laboratory study until the results have been replicated in actual classrooms. De Keyser himself has made clear that there are rules that could not be learned by practice of explicit declarative knowledge. For example, the acquisition of what is too abstract or probabilistic for learners to hold as declarative knowledge. Skill development can play a role in language behavior, but De Keyser in 2015 restricts its role to when 4 conditions are satisfied. Skill acquisition theory, he says, is most easily applicable to what happens in high-aptitude adult learners engaged in the learning of simple structures in fairly early stages of learning and in instructional contexts. That success in a second language skill-building classroom will be constrained by intelligence gives a sense of elitism. Skill theory requires learning the proper declarative knowledge and proceduralizing that accurately, or else what gets automatized is non-native-like behavior. But it is a challenge even for some people to understand the so-called easy rules. Variable success is a self-fulfilling prophecy of a skill-building approach. This approach also leaves the unmotivated behind. A serious and overlooked consideration is whether the approach can work in a typical situation, that is, a group of teenagers who were in class because they were fulfilling a graduation requirement. Explicit learning requires a conscious intention to learn, attention to the form, and awareness of what is being learned. What motivates students to learn the grammar rules and use them in class? Especially if the rule is hard to understand and apply, and errors are corrected, and students are graded on accuracy. Then students may engage in avoidance behavior, never proceduralizing the rule. Let's not forget that the skill specificity of procedural knowledge means that students will have to practice the skill of production, which causes a lot of anxiety for many students. Furthermore, when taking a skill-building approach, it is hard to escape ordering lessons and syllabi by the rule of the day. This has many problems that Krashen has long identified, like restraining communication and limiting review. De Keyser is also aware of this potential trap, because he wrote in 2007 about not reverting to a structural syllabus that merely teaches the structure of the day, or becoming obsessed with a mere focus on forms. Motivation to learn the language or pass a class is unnecessary in a comprehension-based and communicative classroom. What matters is whether the activity and content is interesting, such that students will want to interpret the message. Native-like knowledge is acquired without students having to produce. Although there are individual differences regarding the rate of acquisition, it can be said that this approach is more democratic, since everyone can acquire independent of intelligence. Furthermore, skill acquisition theorists would criticize that mainstream designs and procedures are a bad implementation of skill building, in that the 3 stages of skill development are either rushed, reversed, or a stage is skipped. They do not spend enough classroom time on meaning-based language use. They try to cover too much, which develops declarative knowledge, then rapidly forgotten, and not enough procedural knowledge. And declarative knowledge is not abstract enough, and not accompanied by enough concrete examples such that its application does not transfer to new contexts. I'll end on a more unifying note. What De Keyser means by practice can include the content, activities, and procedures of other approaches. In his words from 2010, "More systematic activities are needed. This does not mean repetitive manipulation of form, but can take a variety of shapes, from initial communicative drills to role-playing activities, task-based learning, and content-based teaching." From De Keyser's 2007 book, devoted entirely to skill building, Chris Vandenbranden's chapter identifies 3 key conditions for classrooms: interactional support, meaningful relevant tasks, and a positive safe climate. Remarkably, different theories of SLA can converge in practice.